But it's also hard for a family, per se, to have a parent, a mom and a dad that are overweight, and have the child that's getting that way. They stay on the couch, and then they send the kid out. So,
this
great
is a
solution.
Family. No,
Do it as a family thing.
Exactly. It's okay to bring your kids to the park and have them run around. Just make sure you watch them.
And also participate
run with them.
With kids.
Exactly. Run with them. Have the children have you as a role model. Have them see you. Maybe you're on the weekend softball team. Maybe you're on a track club. Maybe you're going to the gym as well. They have to see from example. So you're absolutely right. Family, unity, going out and exercising together. Very important.
And they also have to see you putting healthy food on your plate. I mean, you can't be having the chicken nuggets and then making them eat salad.
Exactly.
I mean, the family has to enjoy
Family
salad
meal.
together. You were saying something earlier, and I wanted you to inform our viewers about your opinions about things that we maybe are not genetically programmed to metabolize properly, but foods that are constantly on our table and we're bombarded with in terms of advertisements on television and radio too.
We live in a rough world right now. You know, all of us are running around, even myself. We're very busy and you're hungry and you just find whatever is available. And trying to seek out healthy food, nutritious food, very difficult. Unfortunately, you walk into the grocery store, you walk into the restaurants, you walk into the food courts, it's all processed, easily available food. And that's one of the big problems. Parents are going out buying food from their children thinking, oh, I'm making food at home. But what are you making? You're making processed food sometimes. Go back to the basics. You know, fruits, vegetables, picked off.
We had guests here that talked about actually creating your menu. Because it's such a quick fix society that you can go through the drive-thru and do all this. But if you actually start with your children, from what we also heard even during the holidays and all this, that you actually plan out a menu and give yourself a head start.
Great idea.
And set aside time on your Sunday to chop up all your vegetables for the week.
And also share with your kids how to do it.
What about milk?
That's a great question.
Hot topic. Hot topic.
Do we need it? Should we be feeding it to our kids?
All I can give you is my own personal opinion and how I treat myself and my family. I don't think we need milk other than in the growth phase of a child's life. Adults drinking milk leads to or contributes to obesity.
Doctor-specific and growth phase.
Just from childhood to about year 1 to 1.5. Some parents will actually breastfeed their children after that. But my own personal belief is after breast milk, there's no real need to have cow's milk introduced into a child's diet. Now, that's all my personal opinion.
Interesting.
Well, we're not supposed to give them sodas, and even diet sodas have their critics. Juice has recently been identified as something that contributes to obesity because it just bombards the body with too much sugar and not enough fiber and other nutrients from whole fruit. So we have water at every meal?
Water. That's it. I mean, it depends on how strict you want to be, but realistically, our bodies were meant to ingest was water. That's it. Now, as you want to migrate from that, you can find healthier beverages that are out there and just be a very wise consumer in how much sugar they're ingesting. But the reality is, hate to say it, water.
A question that we're going to put to our expert: do cell phones cause brain cancer? This has been hotly debated in the scientific community, and we're going to get Dr. Anthony Cardillo's opinion on this when we return here on Healthline.
Welcome back to Healthline. I'm Gregory Zarian along with Susanne Watley, and you can always catch us here every Tuesday night from 7 to 8 on Charter Channel 280, and we have our very own YouTube channel at GAMC Healthline. And we're always on the web at www.glendaleadventist.com/healthline. Now tonight we're answering your questions that you emailed or called in, and we have Dr. Anthony Cardillo to answer them.
Our next question from one of our viewers: I see more and more products advertised as gluten-free. Why is this such a new trend? Are there that many people who have a problem with gluten, and what does it do?
Yeah. Very good question again, and actually it's not a new trend. There were a lot of people about 10 years ago that were identified as having gastrointestinal distress, a lot of what we call the IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And they were out there. They just didn't know it was causing a lot of these problems. And little by little, more and more patients were diagnosed with either gluten insensitivity or actual frank celiac disease. So the way this works is that wheat has a protein in it called gluten. Okay? It's part of the husk of the wheat. And it's processed and it stays in the wheat product. So bread and whole wheat and crackers and cereals and a lot of things that have wheat in it have this gluten molecule in it as well. That gluten protein is very, very irritating to the lining of the intestinal system. That protein causes a profound inflammatory response. So the bowel lining, the intestinal lining, gets all swollen with mucus, and it cannot absorb the way it normally absorbs. And it also can't secrete the enzymes it normally secretes. So it's a perfect setup for digestive illness because you can't absorb nutrients, you can't secrete proper enzymes, food stays in the GI tract, the bacteria metabolize it, and all the consequences that come with that. Bloating, diarrhea, gas, cramping, all of these things that people with gluten disease and celiac disease have. And we're just seeing more and more of it now because there are a lot of processed products. And unfortunately, whether you realize it or not, a lot of processed products have wheat in it. Okay? You ingest it, you get irritated, and before you know it, we have an epidemic again.
Is it genetic?
Yes, it's genetic both on the plant side, on the wheat side, and on the human side. We've noticed a lot of the wheat that we're creating nowadays and growing and processing has been genetically altered to have higher amounts of gluten in it. Okay? And so that, coupled with people having genetic predisposition to not being able to metabolize the gluten, coming together, again, perfect storm. But again, we're seeing a lot of it.
Are we just eating too much wheat and perhaps grains overall? When you look at the food pyramid that's produced by the federal government, you're supposed to have 9 to 11 servings of grain a day. It's at the very base of the pyramid. And I did an interesting interview with Dr. Robert Atkins, the late Dr. Atkins, he of the famous diet, who said that his conclusion was that it was a conspiracy by the cereal manufacturers manipulating the data and the government people who were in charge of producing the food pyramid to come to this conclusion when we don't need anywhere near that number of grains in our diet.
Very good point. It really all depends on where your paranoia radar barometer is. I tend to agree with what he has to say. I think a lot of the foods that we eat, a lot of the things we see on the shelf, a lot of these food pyramids being created is manufactured based on the business culture that we have, the dairy, groups, the wheat groups pushing products. So, listen, I don't want to create a political debate, but the reality is we do ingest a lot of wheat. We don't need that much, and there are a lot of people that are they're very sensitive, and they have gluten insensitivity, and that gluten is irritating their bowel. And there's a whole spectrum that we're seeing. There are those that have very mild irritation, and they have just chronic allergies and just chronic inflammation in the bowel that's on a low level, and we have those that have profound celiac disease where they have real consequences. And, I think it's a very good thing that we're seeing more gluten-free foods out there because for a long time it was very hard to even have gluten-free products.
I noticed at Whole Foods the other day they have a whole gluten-free section.
Yes. Yes, it's becoming a huge problem in America. The identification, it's not like this disease just popped up out of nowhere. It was there, but A, people were not eating as much, bread and cereal and whatnot, and B, people just didn't know what they had. And it's one of those diseases where you're not going to rush to the doctor because you're just having, a little bit of gas or a little bit of discomfort or cramping or perhaps 1 or 2 days of diarrhea. You're not going to run to the doctor for that. You just live with it. And that's what was happening with a lot of people. But now they're becoming more and more paying attention to it.
You made a comment, doctor, and I want to revisit dairy real quick. Okay, you said dairy is good for your body from infancy to 1.5. What do you do? Because don't we all need milk?